Today, we are diving deep into a topic that affects every single one of us. But let's be honest, most of us are terrible at it. Spotting a liar. And you can forget everything you think you've learned from movies and TV shows. We're going to look at what the science actually says.
You know the feeling, right? We've all been there. You're in a conversation and something just feels off. You get that little alarm bell in your head, that nagging suspicion that the story you're hearing just doesn't quite line up. But the real question is, how reliable is that gut feeling?
Well, as it turns out, not very. Study after study has shown that the average person can spot a lie with only about 52% accuracy. That's barely better than flipping a coin. So what's going on here? Why are we so bad at this? All right, so let's break down why we're all missing the mark. The biggest reason our accuracy is so low is that we've all been fed a bunch of myths. You know, these popular ideas about a liar's tells, those little giveaways that are supposed to expose them. But, as we're about to see, the science tells a completely different story. Just think about it for a second. What are the classic signs of lying that we're all taught to look for? Avoiding eye contact? Fidgeting with their hands? Shifting around nervously? Well, it turns out research has shown again and again that these nonverbal cues are incredibly unreliable. A perfectly truthful person can be nervous and fidgety, and a practiced liar can be as cool as a cucumber. We're just looking for all the wrong signals. So if we can't trust body language, what can we trust? This is where things get really interesting. There's a whole area of research that offers a much better way, the cognitive approach. Instead of trying to spot nervousness, this strategy focuses on what's happening inside the liar's brain.
This right here, this quote, is the key to everything. It's the central idea. For our brains, telling the truth is pretty easy. But lying? Oh, that is hard work. It takes a ton of mental energy.
And this slide really shows you why. I mean, look at the difference. To tell the truth, your brain just has to do one thing, recall a memory. Simple enough. But to tell a convincing lie? Whoa. First, you have to actively suppress the truth. Then you have to invent a whole new story. Then you have to make sure that story is consistent with everything else you've said. And on top of all that, you have to monitor the other person's reaction to see if they're buying it. It's a total mental juggling act.
And that mental juggling act leads us to a brilliant, elegant strategy. If lying is already a really tough job for the brain, the goal is to increase that cognitive load even more. The whole idea is to push the liar's brain to its absolute limit until it just can't keep all those balls in the air. That's when they make a mistake, contradict themselves, or reveal inconsistencies.
Okay, so how do you actually do this in a real conversation? Well, researchers have pinpointed several super effective techniques. We're going to look at 3 of the most powerful ones you can use to really put a potential liar's brain under pressure.
All right, here are 3 game changers. First, you impose cognitive load directly. The classic example? Ask them to tell their story in reverse. It's so much harder to keep a fake story straight backwards. Second, encourage more and more detail. A truth teller can pull from a rich memory, but a liar has to invent all that detail on the fly, which is exhausting. And third, ask questions they couldn't possibly have anticipated. Get them off their prepared script.
Let's really focus on that first technique for a second, asking someone to tell their story in reverse order. It sounds almost too simple to work, doesn't it? But a 2008 study published in the journal Law and Human Behavior showed just how powerful it can be. They set up an experiment to see if this one little trick could actually improve how well people spot lies.
So, in the first part of the study, police officers watched videos of suspects telling their stories the normal way, in chronological order. Their accuracy rate for spotting the liars was, well, it was a dismal 42%. I mean, think about that. That's actually worse than just flipping a coin and guessing.
But then, the officers watched videos of suspects who were instructed to tell their exact same stories, but in reverse chronological order. And the result? Bam! Their accuracy jumped all the way to 60%. Just by making the liars' brains work that much harder to manage a fake timeline backwards, their lies became way more obvious. That is a huge improvement from one single instruction. Now, these cognitive techniques are incredibly useful, but they all depend on one key assumption, that the liar is consciously and strategically trying to deceive you. But what happens when the lying isn't strategic at all? What if it's not a means to an end? Well, that's where we find a really complex twist in this story, when deception becomes something else entirely.
And that's where we run into a phenomenon that researchers call pathological lying. Now, this isn't just someone who tells a lot of lies. This is defined as a persistent,
compulsive pattern of deception that actually causes the person significant distress and really messes up their life.
This table does a fantastic job of clearing things up. On one side, you have a prolific liar. Yeah, they lie a lot, but it's usually strategic, to get something they want. But now look at the column for pathological liars. Sure, the frequency is high, an average of 10 lies a day in one study, but the really crucial differences are the high levels of personal distress and the significant problems their lying causes in their lives. And maybe most importantly, look at the motivation. It's often compulsive, for no obvious reason at all.
So, this is the really critical distinction. For someone who is a pathological liar, the deception isn't just a tool they're using. It's a compulsive behavior that feels out of their control. It's more like a symptom of an underlying psychological condition, and it has to be understood in a completely different way than everyday dishonesty.
So, after digging into all this, what's the one thing you should walk away with? It's this. If you want to get better at spotting deception, you have to stop looking for nervous twitches and shifty eyes. Instead, you need to learn to listen for the signs of a brain under pressure, the hesitations, the contradictions, the lack of rich detail that start to show up when a liar's mind is totally overloaded.
But all of this leaves us with an even bigger question. It's fascinating to learn how to detect deception in other people, for sure. But maybe the real challenge isn't about the lies we hear from others, but about the truths we avoid telling ourselves.